Mu gihe kirenga imyaka 30 intambara mu burasirazuba bwa Congo yanyuze mu bihe bitandukanye, imitwe y'inyeshyamba izamuka kandi igahinduka yose isezeranya ubwisanzura ariko igasiga hasenyutse. Ariko inkuru ihora iri imwe, abaturage nibo bahora bishyura ingaruka. Abantu barenga miliyoni 7 barimuwe mu gihugu mu kibazo ni ivuga ko ari kimwe mu byibanze biremereye ku isi. Repubulika ya Demokarasi ya Congo irarenganya mu 2023 ishyigikiwe n'u Rwanda kushinga ubutegetsi bwayo mu ntara z'uburasirazuba igahinyura ububasha bwa leta. Iduha ibiganiro biyobowe na Qatar biracyakomeje n'umutwe wa 2023 i Washington. Amasezerano ya Leta Zunze Ubumwe za Amerika na Kigali ateganya ko ingabo zikurwa ndetse hanashyirwaho uburyo bwo gukorana mu mutekano, ariko ku butaka amasasu aracyumvikana. Hejuru y'ibyo byose hari ikibazo cy'ibiturika ku mabuye y'agaciro akoresha ikoranabuhanga rigezweho n'ikibazo cy'abahungukira ku gihe amahoro abangamiwe. Itsinda rya ONU rigenzura iby'umutekano ryabujijwe na M23 gukora neza mu bice bimwe by'uburasirazuba bwa Congo, bikagangamira ubushobozi bwabwo bwo gukora iperereza ku byaha by'uburenganzira bwa muntu, bituma hagaragara ibibazo kimwe niba ukuri kutabasha kubaho amahoro ashoboka ate. Mu minota 30 iri imbere turabaza ibibazo bisobanura kimwe mu bibazo bimaze imyaka myinshi muri Afurika, dukesha umuyobozi ukomeye wa diplomasi ya Kinshasa kugira ngo aduhe uko iki gihugu kibona iki kibazo cyakurikiyemo ibihugu bituranye. Therese Kayikwamba Wagner, Minisitiri w'Ububanyi n'Amahanga wa Repubulika ya Demokarasi ya Congo, aganira na Al Jazeera. Ikibazo cya mbere cya Al Jazeera yavuze ati: turumva ibiganiro biri gukorwa ku bufatanye bwa Qatar mu gushaka amasezerano y'amahoro ya nyuma hagati ya 2023 na guverinoma yanyu. Ese mwaba mugeze hafi yo kugera kuri ayo masezerano? Minisitiri yasubije ati: amahoro ni urugendo, nizeye ko turi hafi kurusha iminsi mike ishize, byumweru bike n'amezi make ashize biragoye kandi ntazabihakana ko rimwe na rimwe ari urugendo rukomeye. Ariko guverinoma ya Congo irakomeje kwiyemeza gushaka amasezerano y'amahoro ya nyuma azarangiza gutizerwa n'iyicarubozo ryo mu ntara zacu ebyiri zikomeye. Turimo gukora ibishoboka byose. Ndi kibazo cya Al Jazeera: nyakubahwa, mwavuga ko bizakorwa mbere y'iherezo ry'uyu mwaka? Minisitiri ati: twifuza ko byakorwa mu byumweru kandi nizeye ko bidakomeza amezi menshi. Al Jazeera: mwifuza ariko ese mubona bizashoboka? Minisitiri ati: turimo gukora ibishoboka byose, birasaba uruhare rw'impande zombi kandi M23 igomba gukira uruhare rwayo. Twizera ko rero bazakomeza kugaragara kandi mu buryo bwubaka. Al Jazeera yongera abaza ati: uvuga uburyo bwubaka, bisa naho hari ibyo mutishimiye bakoze, ni ibiki? Minisitiri ati: nshobora gutangirira ku kwicwa kw'abasivile batazize ukwigarurira ubutaka bw'igihugu bifashishije ingabo z'u Rwanda. Nanone bashyiraho ubutegetsi bwigenga mu gihe turi mu biganiro by'amahoro, bahonyora amategeko y'igihugu bashaka kurwanira. Ibi byose bigaragaza icyuho hagati y'ukuntu bigaragara mu biganiro n'ukuri ku butaka, by'umwihariko ku baturage bacu. Al Jazeera nayo ati: ese ibi bibazo ntibyakemuwe mu biganiro by'amahoro? Haracyari kutumvikana kugira ngo ku ngingo y'ingenzi yo kwiyunga kwa M23 no kugarura ubutaka bwa guverinoma.
To the government of the DRC. Is that still a contentious point?
Minisitiri ati nka mbere dufate icyemezo cya ONU cya 2027 cyangwa amasezerano y'amahoro twagiranye n'u Rwanda muri Washington ku ya 27 Kamena. Intego yacu ni ukugarura ububasha bwa leta. Nta senariyo izemerera guverinoma ya Repubulika ya Demokarasi ya Congo kwemera ko habaho ingabo zigarurira igihe kirekire zica amategeko.
Will ever accept a prolonged presence of an occupying force that is undermining the rule of law.
Al Jazeera ati ese 23 ntiyemera icyo cyemezo niyo habaye amasezerano ya Doha ku ya 19 Nyakanga. Minisitiri ati biragenda gahoro gahoro ariko bakenewe ibikorwa bifatika ku butaka bishimangira neza ko bazanye neza mu biganiro. Al Jazeera ati 23 bazabyemera koko. Minisitiri ati twizeye ko tuzakomeza ku mahame yacu. Icyo 23 izakora ni inshingano yayo, ariko turiba ukuri ku butaka. Bagaragara mu biganiro bahari basinya inyandiko, ariko ibikorwa byabo ku butaka bigaragaza icyuho.
The facts also show the realities on the ground that I just enumerated. So this is where we have to strike a balance, and I think this is where different partners have different partitions and different roles that they can play.
Al Jazeera ati ese 23 izemera kuvanaho ubutegetsi bwigenga cyangwa muzabura icyizere ko bashaka gusa gutinda igihe.
Is committed to the principle of eventually disbanding the parallel administration, or do you have serious doubts that they're just, letting time pass?
Minisitiri
ati nizeye ko bazumva ukuri ku butaka ko guverinoma ya DRC itazemerera ko bagumaho barwanira, kandi abandi bose ntibazabyihanganira. Ni ukwiyongera ku butaka. Nizeye ko rero bazaba programmatike bakumva ko kwicara aho bidashobora kwihanganirwa.
Is one that will not be tolerated, not by the Congolese government or by the international community.
On October the 14th, the DRC and the
ku ya 14 Ukwakira DRC nayo 23 bemeranyije gushyiraho itsinda rigenzura ihagarikwa ry'intambara. Ariko haracyari intambara. Ese ihagarikwa ry'intambara rizatangira ry'ukuri ryari? Minisitiri ati ku ruhande rwa guverinoma ya Congo twiyemeje guhagarika intambara, ariko tugomba no kurinda ubutaka bwacu kuko 23 ifashwa n'ingabo z'u Rwanda. Nta bwisanzure bwo kwagura ubutaka twemera. Al Jazeera ati ese hari ugutinda kubera iki?
Do you perceive there is a delay or a lack of willingness or desire on the part of Rwanda or the M23 to commit?
Minisitiri ati imyitwarire yabo ku butaka irigaragaza. Niba baziteguye guhagarika intambara, natwe tuzahagarika. Al Jazeera ati ese guverinoma mwabibabwiye bakavugaho bati oya? Minisitiri ati sinari mu biganiro by'imbona nkubone, ariko politike yacu ni ugukingira ubuzima bw'abasivile kandi guhagarika intambara ni ngombwa. 23 nta gushidikanya bafite ku myitwarire yacu. Al Jazeera ati se kuki gusimburana kw'abafungwa byatinze? Minisitiri ati iyo usinya amasezerano akazi nyakuri karatangira. Hari intambwe nyinshi rero z'icyerekezo n'ubushobozi zigomba kwitabwaho. Turimo gukora ibishoboka byose ku ruhande rwacu kugira ngo twitegure gusimburana kw'abafungwa. On our side, we're doing our utmost to prepare technically and operationally to be ready for a prisoner swap.
I
You
think
know the criticism, I'm sure, though, from the other side.
Al Jazeera ati
which is
ariko
that
hari abavuga
the
ko
DRC
DRC idashaka kurekura imfungwa cyangwa se gusimburana kuko ababona nk'abakora ibyaha. Ese nibyo?
Is that the situation?
Minisitiri ati kurekura imfungwa cyangwa se gusimburana ntibigomba gufatwa nk'uburenganzira bwo gukora ibyaha. M23 igomba gusobanukirwa ko ukwitwara neza mu biganiro by'amahoro bisaba kubahiriza amategeko. Ntushobora rero kubaka amahoro arambye mu burasirazuba bwa DRC utita ku butabera.
To do some soul searching and understand a bit more what it means to be a party to a peace process that has the ambition to create lasting peace. And we have all learned, not just from the DRC's own history, but you look at our neighbors, you look beyond our neighbors, you look at so many other regions and continents. You cannot build sustainable peace on the foundation of impunity. And the M23 needs to understand that.
Was this a point that perhaps wasn't clarified?
Al Jazeera ati amasezerano yagiye avugwa nabi. Minisitiri ati hoya.
It
that
should
you shouldn't
be.
get away with killing.
It should be.
And you shouldn't be rewarded for killing.
Absolutely. But do you think there was perhaps the agreement was too vague in just mentioning the exchanges of...
Politike yacu ku byerekeye impunity irasobanutse. Perezida Tshisekedi yagaragaje ko tutashobora kubaka amahoro arambye mu burengerazuba bwa Repubulika ya Demokarasi ya Congo cyangwa ahandi hatabanje ubutabera.
In Eastern DRC or other parts of the DRC without justice.
Okay, so when do you think...
Al Jazeera ati se mutekereza ko bizaba ryari? Ese gusimburana kw'abafungwa bizakorwa mu byumweru cyangwa mu mezi? Minisitiri ati iyo byari mu maboko yanjye twari kuba bimaze kumvikana ejo. Turifuza ko byakorwa mu byumweru si amezi. Biterwa rero n'imyitwarire ya M23.
It depends on the posture and on the attitude of the M23 in the talks.
And does that apply as well to the ceasefire? Do you have any idea? Can you tell our viewers in weeks or months you expect the ceasefire to be in place? Do you have any expectations?
The earlier the better, but at this point it would be difficult to, or it would be over optimistic or over ambitious, if you want, to provide a concrete date.
It sounds like many of the key issues are still way too much up in the air, are they?
Not necessarily.
I mean, the ceasefire, the prisoner swap, the dismantling of parallel administrations, it doesn't sound like there's been a lot of tangible progress.
Not necessarily. I differ there. And I think this is sometimes the difficult nature of a peace process that has to be conveyed to an audience that has high expectations. What you see in the news is that there are talks ongoing. It triggers the expectation that there will be a solution, a quick one. But at the same time, we are never in a position in peace talks to delve into so many details that we can share them to the public. So while it may seem that progress is lagging on or is not happening as quickly, it doesn't mean that the work is not happening. It doesn't mean that the efforts are not being put in. But it means that sometimes you have to create, if you want, a bit of a bubble to make sure that the minimum of, let's call it trust or trust building that you need to move ahead for a peace process is maintained.
In addition to the Doha dynamic, if we can call it that, of the talks between the DRC and the M23, you've also got the other dynamic of the talks between the DRC and the Rwandan government. There was an agreement that was signed on June 27th in Washington, D.C., and the expectation was that the two presidents, the president of Rwanda and DRC, will meet to sign a further final agreement. Any idea when that might happen?
Well, the further or the next step, if you want, of the meeting at the level of the heads of state, first of all, depends on the availability of the three heads of states. I think on the side of the DRC, on the side of the US, and I want to believe on the side of Rwanda, it's unequivocal All parties are committed to having that meeting as soon as possible.
Why do you say you want to believe? Do you have doubts that the Rwandan party
yes,
is serious?
Yes, because they still have 6,000 troops on a sovereign territory.
And you don't think
they're still looting, they're still killing, they're still maiming, and they're still raping. That is the reality. Now, does that mean that they are not committed to finding a lasting solution or to engaging in a process? Not necessarily. We want to be generous and give the benefit of the doubt that this, hopefully, is the process.
Well, it sounds like you're saying you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but when you look at the reality of their actions, you don't really believe the Rwandan side is serious about peace.
I trust the facilitation. I trust the facilitation. I trust the fact that for once in Eastern DRC and the Great Lakes region, we have stakeholders that are truly committed, that have levers that they're willing to activate, that have pressure points, be it on the DRC or on Rwanda or on other parties, that can hold the parties accountable.
That sounds like you're trusting in the mediators or outside actors to actually put pressure on Rwanda rather than Rwanda's serious commitment to peace. Have I understood you correctly?
This is not the first agreement we're signing in the Great Lakes region. And when you look at why so many others faltered, then it was because of a lack of accountability. And I think this is where the commitment and the engagement of the US and of Qatar are playing a much bigger role than has been the case in the past. We have to be cognizant of the fact that we are coming from 30 years of conflict. On the side of the DRC, over the 30 years, we have had different governments, we have had different presidents. On the side of Rwanda, it has been a full continuity.
Do you still believe then what some DRC officials have been talking about, that the Rwandan side simply wants to break the eastern part of the DRC up or break it away? That is their real goal. It's not to reach a peace agreement that would see the dismantling of M23 and these groups. Do you still believe that, or is your opinion of the Rwandan position now different, having engaged in further talks?
I don't want to speculate about what Rwanda wants and Rwanda doesn't want.
Well, your officials have already said that. They said they believe Rwanda wants to break the eastern side of the DRC. Is that still...
believing, what comes above believing is knowing. And what we know is that our territory will remain whole. Our territory will not be undermined, despite the efforts or attempts that may come from any side.
But do you know the Rwandans don't want to break off the eastern part of the DRC?
I think the past years have given us ample evidence and ample examples that could lead us to believe that it is the case.
Madam, how can you go into serious talks with another party if you believe they're actually just wasting your time with these talks? They want to break up your country. That's why, forgive me for drilling down on this, but this is what I'm trying to understand. When you go into talks and you have DRC officials who say, we know or we think the other side just wants to break our country up, doesn't that really dent your confidence in the whole point of talks?
Not necessarily, because we also know that the other party fully depends on international aid. We know that the other party would not be existing if it hadn't been propped up by so many countries over the past decades. And this is why it's important to have this discussion at a higher level. It's not just a discussion at a bilateral level. It's not an issue just between the DRC and Rwanda. It's an issue about international law.
You've spoken about the grievances which the DRC feels towards the Rwandan side. Let me present to you the alternative narrative. During that June peace agreement or agreement that was signed in Washington between the Rwandan and the DRC teams, the statement was made from the Rwandan side, from the Rwandan foreign minister, calling for what they said was a verifiable end to the DRC's support of the group known as the Fdlr. Can you tell the world you do not support
we do not
arm
support
or collaborate
the FDLR. We do not.
In any way?
They are Rwandans. They have
Okay.
been on our territory for the past 30 years. They have been preying predominantly on our population, not on the Rwandan population.
Madam Foreign Minister, why then do you think there have been several international human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch in December, going all the way back even 2009, that have spoken about the support of the DRC government for the Fdlr, saying They have been either allies or enemies of the Congolese government, depending on its relationship with Rwanda. So I'm wondering, how do you respond to that accusation? It's long-standing that the DRC basically uses the FDLR as some kind of pressure tool, depending on the status of its relationship with Rwanda. Is that a fair assessment?
It isn't. You're talking about 2009, and we're in 2025.
But what about the Security Council resolution? That was in 2025, 2773, when in point 6 it said, it, quote, condemns support provided by DRC military forces to specific armed groups, in particular the FDLR, and calls for the cessation of such support. Were they wrong as well?
Well, if there are cases of support to the FDLR, and I think this is the important distinction we need to make, it is not state policy. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about individuals within the army, and when we have evidence of that, we also have mechanisms to hold them accountable and to sanction them. On the flip side, when you look at the presence of the Rwandan army that sends over 6,000 troops into the DRC, we're not talking about random individuals who are not behaving. We're not talking about a few military that find themselves in a foreign country and decide to do whatever they want. And so the question is, when you have 6,000 Rwandan troops on our territory, is that not state policy?
But why then do you think the Security Council would call on the Congolese military rather than on random elements within it? Have they really, Security Council members, misunderstood the situation? Is that your message to viewers?
No, because these random members are still part of the army. And so the army is held accountable, and is held accountable to make sure that any behavior that does not, that is not in line with its policy is sanctioned.
But when your own military had to issue a communique on the 10th of October 2025, calling upon its soldiers not to collaborate with the FDLR, why would the military have to do that? Why would it even have to...
Precisely to foreshadow
let me just finish
sanctioning.
the point, madam. But why would it need to even threaten sanctions if these were, in your words, just random minor elements? This must be quite a rampant, prevalent problem, right?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, the fact that you are explicit about something not being tolerated does not necessarily indicate the extent of the problem. The fact that you mention a problem does not mean that it is a problem of a certain magnitude. The issue that is clear here is that we clearly communicate to the public and to our army that any discretion will not be tolerated. Again, have we seen anything of the sort come from Rwanda? Maybe to the 6,000 troops that are still in DRC? Do not go into a territory that is not yours. Do not rape, do not loot. Do not take minerals, do not kill, do not seize land. We have not seen any institutional reaction on the side of Rwanda for its blatant violation of our territorial integrity and for its blatant occupation of our territory.
In that same communique, the Congolese military called on the FDLR to surrender, either to the DRC military or to the UN forces. Has there been any surrendering process underway?
Yes, because when it comes to surrenders, for example, the United Nations peacekeeping mission has a permanent process, if you want, to disarm ex-combatants who wish to disarm, including foreign ex-combatants. So this has never been suspended. It has always been ongoing.
But is it picking up steam to a point where you could say to viewers, you think that within weeks, months, the FDLR will be disbanded? Can you say that?
It's part of the process, of the Washington process, and the agreement that we signed with Rwanda in Washington. We are seeing on the ground that there has been an increase in sensitization work. You mentioned the press release that has been issued by the armed forces. At the same time, in areas that we control, we do our utmost, again, to sensitize communities and to call on FDLR to surrender and to go back home. And we're doing our utmost in the areas that are under our control to continue the work at different levels to sensitize them to surrender and to go back home.
Do you think Rwanda is still supporting the M23 at the same level, despite the UN Security Council resolution that we've been discussing?
I think Rwanda's position towards the UN Security Council resolution and other declarations from the UN has been very clear. It's been a defined one. So we are aware of the fact that there are still Rwandan troops. There is still equipment being provided. Now, the extent that
equipment
may vary.
provided to the M23
Course,
by the Rwandan
yes.
government. So
Yes.
you haven't seen a change in their posture towards the M23?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. On June the 16th, 2025, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, he was reporting to the Human Rights Council, and he said his office was investigating alleged summary executions, arbitrary arrests, and forced disappearances committed by the DRC military. Has the DRC military committed those crimes?
If they have, then they will have to answer, the individuals who have will have to answer to the military justice.
Have you been in touch with the UN?
Yes, of course.
To
Yes.
say, give us the evidence, we'll look into this, we'll
Not
work
only
with
that,
you?
not only that, I will take it further. In February, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution calling for the establishment of an independent verification commission that would come to document and report on massive human rights violations in the areas where the conflict has been the most intense over the past years. We do not believe that this is going to be a one-sided effort. We
Right.
think that the United Nations will have to look at everything that has happened. And
To be fair to the UN, they have spoken about abuses committed by the M23, and so have several international human rights organizations. So there's been a lot of criticism on the other side as well.
We have been continuously in a constructive dialogue with the United Nations on this matter. So we have no worry whatsoever about the presence of such an independent inquiry commission to establish facts on human rights violations. And we will take our share of the responsibility. We will make sure that we put in place the mechanisms that are necessary to provide justice for those who have been wronged. Now, this verification or this independent commission was to be preceded by a verification team that conducted visits in Eastern DRC. But for your information, the M23 refused them access in the areas they occupied.
Okay, but if you're happy to work with investigators, I think if I boil down what you're saying, why then have we have reports by some of the international human rights organizations like Amnesty International, like Human Rights Watch. They've documented what they say are atrocities by the M23, but also by the Congolese forces. Amnesty, August 20th, talking about rapes committed by Congolese soldiers before the fall of Bukavu. Human Rights Watch, September 15th, talking about Congolese soldiers opening fire and killing unarmed protesters. But perhaps one of the concerning points is Amnesty says on July 18th it requested information from the Congolese military but got no response. Why would you not work with them?
Well, I mean, this is something I would have to cross-check on, specifically in this particular case. But again, as I said, especially when it comes to the United Nations, which is our natural, if you want, or our more permanent interlocutor, we are in a constructive dialogue. We are in a constructive dialogue, which means that sometimes we also are willing to listen to truths that may be difficult to digest, but also that we are able and confident about reaching out to the United Nations to work together on certain issues and to see how they can be redressed. So I think this is the critical aspect about being in a constructive dialogue. Our capacity to still absorb the criticism, to evaluate it in a critical manner, also a self-critical manner, and also to take the steps to redress issues, be it through sanctions. And there have been sanctions. It is not as if things happened in a vacuum of complete impunity. There have been sanctions, but also to take measures for greater prevention. And in that regard, there have also been sustained efforts, and we continue to make those efforts, including with international partners such as the UN, that train our troops, that train our police, our investigators, to make sure that we have a more robust architecture that enables us to prevent or to react when there are violations.
Thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you so much for having me.